My father-in-law had no idea I owned 57% of his $690 million factory. To him, I was only the quiet machinist who carried the smell of steel dust in his clothes and tiredness in his posture. The gravel road to his farmhouse cracked beneath the tires, throwing pale clouds into the evening air. Cornfields bent gently in the wind like a slow-breathing chest. Inside, the dining room felt too formal for family. A long wooden table, polished to glass, cut the space in half. Crystal glasses chimed when we sat. The roast lamb steamed in the center, its scent heavy and buttery. He placed his hand on my shoulder, not kindly but appraisingly, like a man testing machinery. "My name is Brandon Reed. I grew up in East Van high-rises where the stairwells echoed and nobody cared who you were. I learned early to listen more than I spoke." He swirled his wine and smiled at me. "Brandon, men like you need structure. I'll give you an office job, $35,000 a year. No grease, no mess." My wife froze beside me. I felt that old instinct to shrink, to apologize for taking up space. A candle between us bent and melted, its wax sliding like a quiet collapse. He talked about loyalty, humility, and knowing your lane. Every sentence sounded polite and perfectly dismissive. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. My lawyer was waiting. I lifted my glass, held his confident gaze, and nodded. At that exact second, his email chimed. And the room changed. The sound was small, just a polite chime, but it felt like a hammer striking glass. My father-in-law paused mid-sentence, fork hovering above his plate. His phone rested beside the breadbasket, screen lighting up his polished oak table like a cold spotlight. I could see his name at the top of the email before he even touched it. He frowned, the easy confidence draining from his face the way warmth leaves a room when a door opens in winter. I kept my eyes on my plate. Steam curled from the lamb, slick with rosemary and fat. My wife's knee pressed against mine under the table, not in comfort but in tension, like she already sensed a fault line opening beneath us. He tapped the screen. Silence stretched. Only the clock ticked, each second too loud, too deliberate. Then his jaw tightened. He read again. I noticed the way his hand trembled just slightly, the kind of tremor a powerful man gets when control slips for the first time in years. Across from me, my mother-in-law cleared her throat, uneasy, smiling into the void. "Is everything all right, dear?" He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes lifted slowly to me, searching, calculating, suddenly unsure. The man who had weighed my worth moments ago now looked like someone who had just realized the scales were broken. I met his gaze calmly. No smirk. No triumph. Just stillness. My lawyer's words were already doing their quiet work. He inhaled sharply and whispered, "Brandon, what is this?" The candle between us flickered hard, its flame bending like it was trying to escape. And in that moment I understood. The dinner wasn't a test of my humility, it was the beginning of his reckoning. He turned his phone toward me, but I didn't look at it. I watched his face instead, the slow unraveling, the thin line of sweat forming at his temple, the way his thumb kept scrolling as if more reading might make the truth disappear. The room felt smaller, warmer. The air smelled like roasted meat, wax, and something metallic like storm clouds pressing close. My wife squeezed my hand under the table. Her nails dug in, not in fear of him but in disbelief at me. For years she'd known me as the man who fixed machines after midnight, who brought home takeout in grease-stained bags, who apologized too much for existing. He cleared his throat. "This says, your firm holds controlling shares." His voice cracked on controlling. I finally looked up. "It says what it says." My mother-in-law laughed softly, brittle as glass. "There must be a mistake. Brandon works the floor. He wears boots." I pictured those boots, scuffed, honest, still wet from the rain that morning. They had carried me through more rooms than this family would ever know. My father-in-law pushed back his chair. The legs scraped harshly across tile, cutting the silence in half. He paced behind his seat like a caged animal who just realized the bars were real. "You didn't tell me," he said. I exhaled slowly. "You never asked the right questions." Outside, wind rolled across the fields, bending the corn in long, uneasy waves. A barn door creaked somewhere in the distance, opening without a hand to guide it. He stopped pacing. Stared at me, not as a son-in-law now but as an opponent. The candle between us guttered low, then flared bright again. And for the first time that night I saw something replace his pride. Uncertainty, wide, cold, and impossible to close. He sat down again, slowly this time, like a man lowering himself into water whose depth he could no longer measure. The dinner had gone cold. Fat on the lamb had hardened into pale glass. The wine tasted thin. Even the house seemed to hold its breath, the old farmhouse beams creaking, then going still. My wife stared at me, searching my face the way you search a familiar room after the lights go out. "Brandon, when were you going to tell me?" she whispered, not accusing, hurt, bewildered, human. I didn't dodge her. When it mattered more than ego. Her eyes flickered to her father. He folded his hands on the table, knuckles white. So this was a lesson? His voice carried more weight than anger now. I shook my head. It was a mirror. Outside, a tractor engine coughed in the distance and died. Crickets started up, thin and nervous. Through the window, the fields looked darker, as if night had leaned closer to listen. He tapped his phone once, uselessly, like a man trying to reboot reality. 57%, he murmured. "You let me build this empire in front of you and said nothing." I thought of every night shift, every overlooked suggestion, every joke about the grease kid. I felt no victory, only the quiet weight of truth settling where bravado used to sit. I leaned forward. "You built machines. I built leverage." For a heartbeat he almost laughed, then the sound collapsed into something fragile. The candle between us bent violently, its flame stretching toward the dark like a reaching hand. And in that flicker I realized, power isn't loud, it's patient. Rain began against the farmhouse windows, light at first, then steady as if the sky had chosen a side. My mother-in-law stood abruptly, chair scraping. She gathered plates with tight, precise movements, avoiding my eyes like I'd become something dangerous. Silver clinked too sharply in the sink, water hissed over metal. My father-in-law stayed seated, staring at the candle between us. Wax pooled in a shallow, trembling lake. I noticed how his breathing had changed, shorter, careful, like a man walking across thin ice. My wife finally released my hand. She pushed her hair back and looked at me differently now, not as a stranger, but as a riddle she had been living with for years. "You let me believe we were barely making it," she said softly. "You let me worry about rent." I met her gaze. "I let you stay you. Not your father's daughter. Not his extension." Thunder rolled far across the fields. The barn outside creaked again, door banging once in the wind. Her father spoke without looking up. "Why tonight, Brandon?" I folded my napkin, careful, deliberate. "Because tonight you offered me a life smaller than the one you already owed me." He finally looked at me, not angry now, just tired, deeply tired. The kind of exhaustion money can't fix. Rain drummed harder on the roof, filling the room with a steady heartbeat. The candle between us guttered low, almost dying, then flared brighter than before, lighting every face at the table in harsh, honest gold. And in that light, no one could pretend any more about who held the balance. The room felt different now, stripped, exposed like a house after the walls come down. Rain hammered the roof in uneven bursts. Water streamed down the windows in trembling veins, blurring the fields into dark smears. The farmhouse clock ticked louder, each second landing like a small verdict. My father-in-law rubbed his temples, slow circles as if trying to massage time backward. His phone lay face down beside his plate, a silent weight he no longer wanted to lift. My wife stood, crossed the room and opened a small window. Cold air slipped in, carrying the smell of wet soil and iron. It cut through the heaviness but didn't erase it. She turned to me. "Did you ever plan to use it against him?" The question landed softly, but it cut clean. I breathed out. "I planned to use it for us. Those are not the same thing." Her father let out a hollow laugh, almost gentle. "You protected my daughter better than I ever did, by outmaneuvering me." I didn't feel proud. I felt weary in a deeper place than bone. Thunder cracked closer now, rattling the china in the cabinet. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied, stubborn. He finally looked at me with clear eyes. "What happens to my factory?" I placed my hands flat on the table, palms warm against the cool wood. "It doesn't fall. It changes." Rain drummed harder, a cleansing rhythm rather than a threat. The candle between us burned straight and steady for the first time all night, its flame unbending, honest. And in that steady light, I realized this wasn't a confrontation anymore, it was a crossroads none of us could run from. The rain softened, thinning into a gentle hiss against the tin roof, as if the storm had said everything it needed to say. My father-in-law pushed his chair back and walked to the window. His reflection floated over the dark fields, doubled and distorted in the glass. For the first time that night, he didn't look like a titan of industry, just an aging man realizing how much he had never seen. My wife moved beside me at the table. Her voice was barely above a breath. "What do you want, Brandon?" I didn't answer right away. I listened to the house instead, The settling beams, the ticking clock, the distant drip of rain from the gutter. Ordinary sounds. Human sounds. Finally I spoke. I want the factory to work the way it pretends to work. Fair wages. Real safety. Voices that don't disappear when they speak. Her father turned slowly. And me? I looked at him honestly. I want you to stay. But not in the throne, in the room. He almost smiled at that, then swallowed it hard. Thunder rumbled far away, more memory than threat. The storm was passing, but its mark remained in the air, clean, sharp, unerasable. I slid my phone across the table to him. A single draft proposal glowed on the screen. Restructuring, oversight, shared leadership. No humiliation. No exile. Just change. He picked it up with both hands as though it were fragile. The candle between us burned low now, its wax a smooth white lake, but the flame did not waver. In that quiet, I understood something simple and aching. Power doesn't heal families, choices do. Morning came slowly, pale and careful, like it was afraid to disturb what had happened. The storm had washed the fields clean, corn bent but unbroken, rain still clinging to every leaf. Sunlight slipped through the farmhouse windows in soft, honest bars that made the dust in the air glow. We sat again at the table, but nothing felt the same. The roast was gone. The wine was capped. What remained was quieter and somehow heavier. My father-in-law read the final version of the agreement in silence. No lawyers in the room now, just family and truth. His hand trembled once, not in fear but in recognition. He looked up at me. You could have destroyed me. I shook my head. I chose not to. Across from us, my wife finally exhaled the breath she'd been holding for years. She reached for my hand, not desperate this time but steady. Outside, workers were already arriving at the factory gate, coffee cups in their hands, jackets pulled tight against the cool air. Ordinary people walking toward a place that would treat them differently from this day forward. My father-in-law stood, walked to the window and watched them. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Then I will learn to lead differently. I joined him at the glass. Together we looked out, not at power, not at money, not at ownership, but at people. The sun cleared the horizon completely. In that light, I realized the real victory wasn't control of a factory. It was the moment a proud man chose humility, and a quiet machinist chose mercy.